How's it going, people? It's Tactard Ted, Tuesday, September 6th. The first day of the work week for a lot of you folks. Did you have a happy commie holiday? I worked because I can. So anyhow, folks, let's talk about failure. Let's talk about the failure of the Kherson offensive and exactly who has failed. I would submit that the failure of the Kherson offensive, although it's not being called that in the Western media yet, although you can see where the Western media is already getting to the point where they're trying to tamp down expectations. They're saying that now these are going to be, these are going to be proportional battles. These are, they made significant gains, and now the only way to exploit them is by this grinding forward. It's all bullshit, folks. It's all bullshit. The Kherson offensive is a failure of the Ukrainian army. It is a failure of NATO, and it is a failure of the United States. Awful lot of assertions there, Ted. Why would you say such a thing? Well, let's go for the big one right off the bat. The United States. Why is it a failure for the United States? Well, it's a failure for the United States because the idea of how this offensive was conducted, which the U.S. advised on it along with the rest of NATO, was based on U.S. doctrine of how to deal with the BTG, the Battalion Tactical Group. This is the basic element that the Russian army is now running. It is a group that is built around heavy weapons, artillery, and armor with a very small infantry component compared to most Western sources. Intelligence in the United States, they do what they do. They're analytical. Sometimes they come to the right conclusion. Sometimes they don't. But the one thing that our intelligence community is not good about is evolving. They're not good about updating. They're not good about looking at what's happening now. They are still always fighting the last war. And that's really what they're doing. They are fighting the last war. They're not, they're basing all their assumptions on how to handle a battalion tactical group based on actions in 2014. And they saw certain shortcomings in the BTG. And this offensive in Kherson was built to exploit the shortcomings that traditionally the BTGs have had. They understand that, at least early on, that they were not putting forth as many UAVs as we do. They weren't as engaged in electronic reconnaissance. That most of that stuff just wasn't happening. And they weren't wrong. The problem was the Russians understood that shortcoming and they've adjusted. And the fact that this was conducted on such a large front in Kherson, it was made to overwhelm the tactical battle groups. It was supposed to be providing so many targets, so much stuff going on that the BTGs would not be able to effectively target and repel, stymie, or break the offensive. And that's what's happened. They have been able to focus and break up the attack. The failure of NATO. 8 years to train this Ukrainian army, poured in tons of NATO weaponry, NATO advisors, including the United States, Great Britain, and France, into this country. They trained them to a NATO standard, the second largest army in Europe, tactically proficient in NATO warfare, numerically superior to the number of Russian troops that conducted the initial phases of the special operation, as Putin likes to call it. Yet, Ukrainians are unable to retake cities, to be able to make significant gains, or to break through the Russian lines. This, make no mistake about it, this Kherson offensive was to break the Russian lines, get into the rear, and exploit. That's what you do in these major offenses. You need to crack the line. Well, they've not been able to crack the Russian line. NATO equipment has failed. NATO doctrine has failed. NATO training has failed. And NATO intelligence has failed. NATO intelligence should have been able to see the Russians reinforcing the Kherson area. They should have been able to see the writing was on the wall, and they should have been able to tell Zelensky, hey, you might want to think about shifting some of these forces to Donbass, where you actually have a fighting chance. The failures of Ukraine. The failures of Ukraine, OPSEC. Number one, operational security. Operational security among the Ukrainians suck. They do. These guys are all worried about headlines. They're all worried about headlines. We will have a massive offensive in Kherson in August. And it came time to put up or shut up. The Russians knew what were coming. They reinforced. They prepared for it. They prepped big time for it. And when the storm broke, it hit a wall. But Ted, there were penetrations. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely there were penetrations. The Ukrainian army penetrated exactly where the Russian army wanted them to. I'm what the Germans would call old Hass, an old bunny, an old rabbit. I've been around, I've seen a few things. I will tell you, wargaming, doing tactical exercises with the military, I learned very early on that it's not hard to sucker your opponent into where you want them. And if you can sucker your opponent to make an attack where you want, into a prepared killing field, you've got them. And not only that, but if you cede a little bit of ground, you give up a little bit of ground, they think they're winning. And they're going to push harder into that kill box. And once in that kill box, you reduce them. And that's, unfortunately, what the Russians have done more than once during this war. They'll pull back a little. They'll pull back a little, and they will allow the other side to occupy ground that they've already got bracketed. They've already got zeroed. And the Russians don't have to be in a hurry. Time is on their side. They are attriting the Ukrainian army. There's about to be a massive upheaval in Europe, politically. The Russians are in no hurry. They're going to allow this self-inflicted wound in Europe to fester. And the longer the fighting goes on in Ukraine, the more it's going to fester. But that's exactly what they've done, folks. And there's no need for the Russians to be in a hurry. If you are going to expend your ammunition, your vehicles, your gas, coming to me to where I can kill you, why do I need to expend my gas? Why do I need to expend my logistics? This war is going to be won on logistics. The Ukrainian planners can't even plan for casualties. They can't even plan blood supplies. They can't even prepare hospitals for what they know is coming. You would almost say that, well, that's good OPSEC, Dave. You don't want to show those guys where you're coming. And yeah, but you've been broadcasting it in the media for months. You've doubled down and tripled down on And the EU is going to fracture. There are about to be some massive upheavals in leadership. Stoltz, gone. I don't think he's going to make the end of the year. I'll be honest, once October comes, there is going to be some serious issues in Europe. We've already seen two leaders, one of them prominent, Boris Johnson. We've seen him leave. And we got dumb, now we're getting dumber because his replacement is vowing to defend Europe to the last Ukrainian against the Russian beast. And that's fine. Brits are not going to put up with having to decide whether they're going to eat or whether they are going to heat their homes. Italy, they've already gotten rid of their leader and made a big change. They're burning their electric bills in protest. They're burning their energy bills. They aren't putting up with it. The Germans aren't going to put up with it. Now here's an interesting thing. Two things are going to happen in October. Number one, the Ukrainians are going to be drafting women. That's how great the war is going for them. They're winning to such a point that they've already ran through the manpower, at least the manpower that will return to Ukraine and die. And now they've done the Volkstrom thing. They've got the old men and little boys. Now it's the ladies' turn to die for Zelensky and right sector. And that's what's going to happen in Ukraine. What's going to happen in Germany? In October, the German government is going to start putting troops in major cities to protect the peace. What does that mean? It means you're not going to go out and protest. You're not going to go out and be able to make your voice heard. Although I think the government's being a little stupid about that. We've seen other times in Europe where the military doesn't stand with the government all the time. We've seen it when East Germany came apart. Troops simply refused to enforce East German laws. We've seen, or orders. We saw that in the Russian Revolution of 91. That sometimes troops would say, hey, screw it, I'm not with the government. I'm not going to shoot at my own people. And that's really what this is. It's a totalitarian crackdown in Europe. France is always on fire the last few years. Always something going on as far as protesting in France. But the French people have not had to decide whether they're going to heat their homes or eat. And that's where that's coming. There is going to be a massive upheaval. And the sad thing is, this is karma. Because what did the Western leaders tell us they intended for the sanctions to be? They intended for it to cause regime change in Russia. They intended to make it so painful on the people that they would demand that Putin be removed from office. Didn't happen. They wanted to destroy the Russian economy. Didn't happen. In fact, right now, gas is cheaper in Russia, food is cheaper in Russia. And overall, the Russians are not suffering like the people of Western Europe are. All this pox that they wished upon the Russian house is manifesting itself in Europe. It's karma, folks. Boris Johnson wanted regime change. He got it in London. The Italian leader wanted regime change. He got it in Rome. Macron wants regime change. He's going to find it in Paris. Now there are a few exemptions to this. Serbia and Viktor Orban in Hungary. They stayed out of this. They've stayed out. They will not support the sanctions. They will not support all this other nonsense going on. And they're secure. But these other leaders, even the Poles are backing off a bit. They don't want to freeze this winter. They don't want to suffer this one. And they're starting to understand that they've shot themselves in the foot. The regime change is coming. It's coming to the EU. If the EU survives the winter. I still honestly believe that there are enough cracks in the foundation. The only people I don't see readily backing down are going to be the Germans. The Germans is going to have to take drastic things to happen inside of Germany before there's a massive change. Schultz will be gone, but the next one will be worse. Just kind of like what's going on with Boris Johnson in the UK right now. I venture to say Johnson's replacement is probably going to be one of the shortest residents of number 10 Downing Street. Because the Western leaders got no clue as to what they're going on. What's going on in the United States? We'll see. We'll see what pedo Hitler has in mind. I don't think his future is very bright. I think a lot of the leftists are looking for a way to jettison President pedo Hitler, and it's overdue. Well overdue. Well overdue. So the sanctions have failed. A failure of the sanctions. The thing that was going to bring down Putin's empire has brought down Johnson's empire, has brought down an Italian empire, and who knows how many of these other countries are going to suffer from this. And to be quite honest, there really ought to be a purge in Brussels amongst NATO. I think we really need to look at our membership in NATO. NATO stockpiles are down to critical levels of weapons because we've simply gave them away. Our NATO allies, just gave all this shit away. They gave it to the Ukrainians. Gave the means to defend yourself away. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that brilliant? And it's going to take years to replenish these things. Meanwhile, do you see any crying of shortages? I mean, real crying of shortages. Not this. The Russians are running out of artillery, which they've been doing now since the second week of the war. And they're running out of gas. You saw that since the second week of the war. They're running out of manpower, so you've seen that since the second week of the war. In fact, they ceased to exist as an army 6 months ago, 7 months ago, 5 months ago, whatever. I think at some point you have to say, hey, the press might be not being honest with us. It's very, very hard now for the European leadership to back down. They've doubled down, they've tripled down. But there is one individual that it's impossible to back down. There is one leader in this conflict that cannot back down, and that's Vladimir Putin. You want to see Vladimir Putin lose his popularity? You want to see calls to get Vladimir Putin ousted? If he would just say, hey, you know what, we'll go back to where we were February 23rd, you guys just agree not to join NATO, we'll get exactly what we wanted from the start. No, Vladimir Putin would be put out of office. So, of all the people who can't back down, Putin definitely can. Or he'll end up like the European leaders, or the EU. He'll end up without a place in the world. So, EU failure, NATO failure, American failure, Ukrainian failure. Although there is one Russian failure. The Russians failed to understand that the West is not rational, that you can't negotiate with terrorists or bullies. And unfortunately, that's what we're becoming, bullies. We don't care what you want. We don't care what you say. It's going to be our way. Smug, arrogant. Nobody has a right to do anything but us. We can do anything we want. Nobody else has a right to do anything. And kind of reminds me of that little guy with the little mustache in the late 30s, early 40s. he pretty much thought he could do anything, and nobody else had a right to survive. Nobody had a right to anything. He was going to do what was best for him. Screw everyone else. And of course, things didn't end up really well for him. He ended up giving himself a 9mm lobotomy. I think that really we need to start waking up. We don't need to be the world police. We have no reason to be world police. We can't even get shit perfect in our own country because we refuse to secure our borders. We refuse to enforce laws on the books so we can write more laws. This is how we nibble away at our own freedom. We allow politicians to make laws against guns. They refuse to enforce those laws, and then they say, see, that didn't work, we need new laws. We do that here. We do that here. And we're just to the point where we can't not step on ourselves right now. $40 billion at one shot to Ukraine. $40 billion. What could we have done with $40 billion? Free school lunches in all schools. Vouchers for private education for those of us who aren't happy with having our children indoctrinated into socialism. What would that $40 billion have bought? What would that $40 billion have bought? Instead, we're going to give it to Raytheon. We're going to give it to the military-industrial congressional complex, which is really what I wanted to say in the speech, and it had to be edited out. You can look that up. I'm not joking. So look back on the failures. Understand the Russians are being very, very shrewd. They're allowing the Ukrainians to come to them and die. And don't want to belittle. There are a lot of brave folks on the Ukrainian side. They deserve a better side. They deserve a better cause. They're fighting in the name of sovereignty that they haven't had since 2014. I love how we like to throw away, nobody has the right to invade a sovereign country. Nobody. Better not tell the troops from the United States who are sitting in Syria, a sovereign country, that they probably shouldn't be there then. And this is what I mean about shooting ourselves in the foot. This is what I mean about we can do whatever we want, nobody else is allowed to do what they want. There's a certain type of arrogance and hypocrisy about that. I don't think that our founding fathers wanted Americans to be arrogant. I don't think that the founding fathers wanted our people to be hypocritical. I think they wanted us to be leaders. And instead of leading by ideas, we're now leading by bullying. And don't get me wrong, I love this country. The United States is one of the greatest countries on earth. Our government happens to be a real fucking issue right now. Our government is not what our founding fathers intended, but it's what we got. And unless we change it, unless we make everybody understand that that's not where we want to be, we're going to continue to have issues. Anyhow, folks, that's what I got for today. I will talk to you later, and if I pissed you off, good. Think about it.